Thank you. Welcome, everyone. This webinar is brought to you by the best and brightest companies to work for. We hope you have information about our very first National Summit coming up September 15th through the 17th in Chicago. It will be featuring keynote speaker Patrick Lencioni. Check our website out for details. On a special note, this program is being recorded and will be posted on the Best and Brightest website. In order to receive your RCI credit, you must complete the SurveyMonkey evaluation that will be sent to you later today. This is the only way you will receive your certificate with the codes for continuing education. So let's get started. Today's program is Building Environments Where People Thrive, a really unique employee engagement tool. Our presenters, Jodi and Rob, will explain. Rob Dwortz is a partner at Become Unmistakable, and Jodi Drew is the Director of Learning at Become Unmistakable. Rob has been a bank CEO and private business owner. He finds the asset of any organization is its people. Jodi has mastered many roles from treasury management to operations management. She has a passion for people and believes learning is a lifelong journey. I'm now going to turn it over to both Rob and Jodi.
Great. Thank you, Gina. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are, everyone. As Gina mentioned, I'm Rob Dwortz, one of the partners in Become Unmistakable, and on behalf of Jodi and the rest of our folks here at Become Unmistakable, thanks for joining us to learn a little bit more about how we build environments where people thrive. As Gina mentioned, I'm a recovering banker. Spent about 23 years kind of working my way through banking positions, transaction management, until I found myself finally living at the top of an organization as a bank CEO. And let's just say in that process in the banking business, I learned a decent amount about how not to create an environment where people thrive. It was a very cold, calculated, what we now call more left brain or two left brain version of leadership that is very traditional, that many of us are trained in, including myself, that I lived within. But I found myself at the very, at that time when I was, in fact, leading an organization, that it didn't work for me. And I was forced to take a different approach. And we're going to talk a little bit about that approach as we go. After that experience, we in fact sold that bank, and that found me in a situation where I was doing more consulting and then came to develop this business called Become Unmistakable with our partners, and that's where the uMap was formed. The uMap, as we'll talk more about, was really formed on this premise that if you focus on supporting the success of your people as they define it, your people will thrive and so will the organization. The idea is based in cognitive science, and that's where Jodi is going to spend some time today talking about what's behind the uMap, but it's also proven in practice in our businesses and in the businesses of our clients. Sorry, I'm dealing with technology. So here's a basic conference room table. So now picture this table filled with high-powered bankers all around it. Here I am. I'm the brand new president of a bank. I'm there with the founder, who's really a job I was brought in to take him out of an operating role. But it's my first month or two on the job, and I'm sitting at this table along with all the other top executives. And I'm an ambitious, relatively young executive myself, and so I'm planning to have something impactful to say at this meeting. So you can picture me. I'm at the side. The chairman's at the head of the table. And it comes my time to talk and share and ask questions. I post a very simple question. Have we ever considered doing X? And there's silence in the room. After a few seconds, the chairman who's at the head stands up and says loudly, "Are you out of your bleeping mind?" So think about that for a second. Think about how that might have made me feel as a young executive, as someone who's trying to contribute to the business, as someone who's trying to give his best. So I share that because I knew in that moment, when I felt that experience, that I needed to find a different way to lead myself. One that focused on building more trust and relationships in the business instead of taking a command and control approach. My own form of leadership, I needed everyone's ideas and questions in order to thrive. I needed to embrace a right brain approach to leadership. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about this. And if you look at the right side of the screen, which is in fact this gentleman's left brain, and we love this visual, this is how I have been trained and frankly where I live naturally. So I am kind of a left brain person. I am highly analytical. I think in black and white. I'm practical and pragmatic. That's where I live. But where I knew I needed to go from that experience and others was I needed to toggle over to the right side, where more emotion, more creativity, more intuition lived. And the reason really was because those are the skills that you need to build trusting relationships in order to build high-performing teams. So that's where I was. That's where I needed to go. So our first question for today is, where are you today? So we have a poll question. And this is simply, where do you lean? Do you consider yourself, based on what you know of these topics today, a left brain thinker or a right brain thinker? I think you have an option here to be either or not sure. So I'm going to ask that everybody tries to find a way to put themselves either in the right or left. And we'll take just a couple moments if you can weigh in on that. It doesn't look like we're getting our technology to work here, so I will just keep pressing ahead. The key to this is there's no wrong answer, and you really need both to create environments where people thrive. We need to lean to the right so that we can build better relationships, more trusting and high-performing teams, but we have to stay tied to the analysis and the logical thinking to make sure that the numbers work. And there's no indictment of left-brain thinkers. You just need to know when to toggle over to the right to make sure you can build those relationships where people thrive.
So I'd like to share, this is Jodi Drew, I'd like to share a little bit of a story that gives you a little bit of my background. And this is a story back from my days when I was also in banking. And it was about 10 years ago on a Tuesday afternoon near the end of the day. In the week before, I had had some medical tests done. I hadn't been feeling well, and my doctor had decided I needed to have a kidney biopsy to try to determine what might be the problem. So after that procedure, they said, you know, we'll schedule an appointment in 2 weeks. We will go over the results at that time. You won't hear from us before then, unless we feel there's something more urgent and we need to address it sooner than 2 weeks. So they scheduled the appointment, and that takes me to this Tuesday afternoon. So my biopsy had been the week before. My appointment wasn't until the following week. And as I sat at my desk, a call came in, and I could see on the display that it was my doctor's office. So you can probably imagine. My thoughts immediately went to the worst scenario, that something is wrong or they wouldn't be calling. And unfortunately, that was indeed the case. As I spoke with the nurse on the phone, she explained that I had been diagnosed with a blood cancer and that I needed to get into treatments immediately. They'd already scheduled an appointment for the coming Friday for me with an oncologist. So you can imagine. At that time, my heart was pounding out of my chest, and I remember trying to understand what she was telling me. In fact, I can remember asking a couple times, you know, what type of cancer was it? And it was almost as if I couldn't hear her or I couldn't process the words. And I finally remember asking if she could spell it slowly so that I could have the words register in my brain. The cancer was called multiple myeloma. So it's not a big word. That evening I went home and frantically Googled and found out that the mortality rate was about 3 to 5 years from the date of diagnosis. So you can about imagine the emotions that went through me that evening. I remember even at home trying to do something as simple as get supper started. Like I couldn't even get the thoughts around how to make something, what my options were. It was as if my brain had shut down. Well, even before the diagnosis, I had started to read and understand more about the brain and how important brain health is to your whole being, to your emotional health as well as your physical health. So I quickly decided that my outlook on this cancer journey that I was about to begin, my outlook would have an important impact on those days ahead. And I started to train myself to look for the positive parts of each day. I had my faith to help me and a wonderful supportive family and a great network of friends around me. And I knew that I had to think about those things as opposed to thinking about the what ifs. So the wonderful end to that story is last June, my doctor declared me cured, something that is very unusual for multiple myeloma patients. But that experience also started a journey for me of understanding the brain and its impacts on all areas of our lives, and especially within the work environments. So if any of you have read Daniel Pink's book, A Whole New Mind, Why Right-Brainers Will Rule the Future, you've probably heard him talk about the historical progression of businesses. You probably have family members that have lived through the industrial age, where the businesses focused on manufacturing and production lines. Then we transitioned and moved into the information age, where technology and data access became the focus. And now, as he mentions in his book, we are entering into a new era where what's going to set businesses apart is how they develop and maximize the potential of their people. So in other words, looking into the brain science and understanding it to get the optimal resources out of your talent. So that starts with understanding the new discoveries in brain science, and then how do you take that information and create environments where people can thrive and reach their greatest potential.
So when you combine these approaches, you think about wanting to take a right brain approach, and then what Jodi's alluding to about gathering some knowledge about what really makes us tick, and then the need for transitioning our skill base to a more soft skill base that is right brain leaning. Then we start to with that knowledge we have the ability to get intentional about creating environments where people thrive, and that's really where our uMap was born and where its design comes from. So with that, I'm going to talk about, with all that in the background, we're going to talk about what we're going to cover today. We are going to talk a bit about the brain science. Jodi is going to touch briefly on brain science behind the uMap in a more science-focused way, so you get a chance to learn a little bit about the why in terms of why it works. We're going to talk about, we're going to give a high-level overview of how we create meaningful connection in the workplace through the uMap. We're also going to provide some specific examples for how we use the uMap for onboarding and team member development. Those are two of the promises that we made. And then finally, we're going to hopefully leave some time for questions and address everything that you may have on your minds.
So we're going to start with me sharing a little bit more into the brain science field. I'm sharing a picture with you. The young man in the yellow shirt happens to be my son. And you probably can figure out from the picture he is in an airplane getting ready to take his first experience of skydiving. So you can see in the background there, Earth below, probably about 14,000 feet below. And just as a mom, I don't have a fear of heights, but when I think about that my son is about to jump into that, knowing when they jump They free fall for probably about 50 seconds where you're waiting, anticipating whether or not that parachute is going to open. Even looking at that picture now causes some anxiety for me. It's uncomfortable. I actually don't even enjoy looking at it because allowing my mind to think about the what if. Now I'll take you to another thought here. It's an email. And let's imagine if you were the recipient of this email. So it's the end of the day, and you get an email that says, for the subject, needing to discuss performance. And it says, "Hi, Jodi. I hope you are able to meet me in my office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. It shouldn't take longer than 30 minutes. There are a few things I feel we need to discuss. Kindly," and it comes from the director of HR. So I'm sure as you read this, you can kind of come up with or anticipate what some of your reaction might be. I can imagine going home and almost feeling like it's a free fall, like you are falling and not sure what's going to happen in the morning. Will you have a job when you return? Probably thinking through your last few weeks and if there's something you did or an interaction that you're trying to remember that could have caused this kind of response. So I want to unpack that a little. Your brain does not differentiate between whether it is a physical threat, like what could happen if you jump out of an airplane, or if it is an emotional threat, like if you would lose a job or you have an unfavorable review at work. When those things happen, the same activity takes place in your brain. And that activity happens within the amygdala. So there's an area in our brain called the amygdala, and it is constantly scanning our environment, trying to determine if we are safe. Its purpose is to determine that, to say, should you feel that you are threatened right now and take a reaction according to a threat, or should you feel like this is a positive thing and that this is actually a reward? And depending on what it determines, it decides what to do. So let's first talk about that threat response, like jumping out of an airplane or receiving that email or getting a call with information or a message that is not exactly what you were hoping to hear. So when it senses a threat, it goes into what is often called the fight or flight response. And when that happens, the amygdala sends a message to your prefrontal cortex. Now, your prefrontal cortex is the area of your brain where you problem solve, where you regulate your emotions, and where innovation and creativity happens. It's often referred to as the executive function of our brain. And when the amygdala senses a threat, it sends a signal to that prefrontal cortex to stop thinking. And it does that by releasing cortisol. You see, our brain uses anywhere from 20 to 30% of our body's energy. And when there is a threat, the amygdala is saying right now that energy is needed somewhere else. You do not need to use up energy to problem solve. We need that energy to react. Our prefrontal cortex is filled with existing neural pathways, kind of like a stored memory of how we do things and what our habits have been. And right now, during a threat, it needs to go on autopilot. You can kind of relate to what that is when you think about when you drive home from work, and if you take the same route home every day. And if you're like me, there's times when you get home and suddenly you can't remember going through a certain intersection. Like you have no recollection in your mind of having done that. And it's because during that time, your brain was on autopilot. It has neural pathways that tell your body how to respond in different situations, and it was on autopilot. Daniel Goleman, in his book Emotional Intelligence, coined the phrase amygdala hijack. In other words, because of the release of cortisol, our amygdala is controlling our response. Our amygdala is not allowing us to think through and make rational decisions. We're no longer able to problem solve like we could if our amygdala had not hijacked the situation. Often, the telltale sign that you've had an amygdala hijack is when you reflect back on a situation that you were involved with and you think something like, I cannot believe I responded the way I did, or I can't believe I said that. You know, I know better. I know that didn't do any good for the situation. Kind of like even when I had the call for cancer, when I said I could literally feel my mind shut down. I was in an amygdala hijack. So the other thing that happens when the amygdala shuts down is, or when the cortisol releases, is it shuts down the digestive system. And that's just another energy source that gets cut so that energy can go in other places. So cortisol is released, and another thing that happens is adrenaline is released. And that adrenaline is basically saying that energy that should have been going to the brain, to problem solving, or to the digestive system, we need that going to other areas, and we need it going to the muscle groups within your body. You think about, you probably heard stories where there's maybe somebody that's being crushed under something, and suddenly somebody has the strength to lift something that normally they would not have been able to. And that's because of the adrenaline coursing through their body. So that's a little bit when you have a threat response. Let's think about switch to the other way, and what happens if your brain says, this is something good, there's not a threat here. This is a picture of me holding my first grandchildren. And I'll be the first to say, grandchildren are the most awesome thing in the world. I had no idea how much I would love being a grandmother. So this was in 2015, 6 years after my initial diagnosis. And I knew when I was diagnosed that there was a high chance that this day would never be a reality for me. At the time I was diagnosed, I had 2 kids in college and 1 still in high school. And as I held that tiny newborn, my brain was in a state of reward. In fact, what was happening was I was having a dopamine dump. So when your brain says this is something good, that same area, that prefrontal cortex, now instead of being shut down, actually becomes able to perform at a higher level. The dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and that neurotransmitter increases our ability to access other neural pathways in our brain. It increases our ability to be innovative, to connect ideas. We have higher collaboration. Reward is good for the brain. So what organizations want to do within the workplace is create those environments where our brains spend more time in the reward state. We're increasing the dopamine, and in turn increasing our ability to innovate and problem solve, where we feel safe and excited to come to work each day and minimize a sense of threat in the workplace.
So Jodi shared quite a bit about both threats and rewards, and obviously when we talk about the uMap, that's what we've designed it to do, to maximize that reward state so that people can do their best work, the most creative, innovative work, and frankly their hardest work. But it's hard work that's done joyfully because they feel like they belong, they feel non-threatened, and that there's a ton of fairness, autonomy, and things that make them feel connected. So how do we use the uMap to do just that? This is the first time now you're seeing the uMap, I'm guessing for most, if not all of you. This is the software itself, and it is a talent and engagement tool for many, many applications. We're going to touch on just a couple today, and we're going to go through some of the information that lives within uMap today as well, but we're really just going to scratch the surface. So at its basic level, the uMap is a collection of information, and you can see this is what's known as our right brain uMap. Along the right side of the screen there is right side, right brain, not coincidental, is information about the individual. These are their likes, their aspirations, their inspirations, and we use that to create a personalized experience for people. And we'll focus in on those content areas in a few slides, so just bear with us. On the left side, left brain, lives the accountabilities of the organization. So things like the employees' responsibilities, their professional goals and development needs, and some other things around success measures that are more measurable. And the employee fills this out and owns all of the contents. This is designed to be the dopamine dump that Jodi describes, trying to get people to live in the reward state. We have 3 different versions of the map. So the one that you just saw is the one that lives all the way on the right side, and we call it the connectivity map. There's a greater amount of information about the individual, less information about accountability. So depending on where your organization is or where an organization is in terms of their priorities, they would choose one of these maps. And again, we'll focus more so on them as the slides go. To the left all the way is the accountability map. We lose a fair amount of information about the individual, but we pick up a bunch of accountability information, things that put front and center with the employee, what their measurable performance indicators are, as well as what the team or even the entire organization's measurable success factors are. So the priority is accountability. You may know your people extremely well already and feel connected them in other ways, and you want to focus on accountability. And in the middle, the balance map is just that. It's a balance of the two. You get to keep a fair amount of the individual's authentic information and keep a certain balanced amount of accountability. So that gets us to our next full question, if it works this time. So here's the question. What do you think is the priority for your organization right now? Is it first creating alignment to the company's goals or organizational goals and priorities? Is it creating more personal, meaningful connection and community with and among your teammates? Or is it taking small steps toward both? And now the technology is working, we can see some information coming in. And we'll take just a moment to let this tally. So that's great. Thanks everybody for participating. It looks like we have a pretty even balance between, we're still tallying. Okay, we do have actually a perfectly even balance, almost now, it's still moving, between either the right brain alignment or left brain alignment with company goals and the meaningful connection, so the combination of the left and right with the small steps toward both. So from our group here, people are really leaning toward that balance, which is in fact representative of our business and our general client base. Second place would go to meaningful connection, and third to the left brain map for the accountability side. So appreciate that. That's valuable information, and again, very consistent with what we've seen. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about each. This is the left brain map, and again, I'll apologize here because this is me. You're going to see a lot of me in the next few slides, so if you look closely, you'll get to know a lot about me. But the left brain map is, again, very much about accountability. And what I'd like to do is orient everybody to the tile information, or the tiles, which are each of the content areas of the uMap itself. We refer to them as tiles, and the types of information we're trying to capture. So in this map, the accountability map, we see top responsibilities, key performance indicators, team success measures along the left-hand side. That allows an individual teammate to know, here's what my responsibilities are in more narrative form, how my performance is measured, and then to have it live side by side with how the organizations or my team, however you define it, that success is measured. Along with that information, you're collecting professional goals of the individual as they define it, and a development plan that they expect to get them to those professional goals. That's what lives on the left side of the left brain map. On the right side, we collect some information on the upper right about important relationships in their lives. Here you get to see my family, my dog. So like I said, you get to know more about me. And then my personal goals in 1, 3, and 5 year time frames. We ask everybody to fill those goals out to balance out their professional goals. And then finally, the last two things, we have an inspirational quote in the lower right and an icon, what we call a brand icon, that lives in the middle of each of our maps. And here we're trying to get a window into the values of the individual, what inspires them, and we do it through these pieces of information. So that is our left brain map. In the interest of time, we're just going to focus on one of those tiles, top responsibilities. This is an incredibly important tile for the uMap, I guess, as they all are. But in our software, which is very simple and kind of survey-based, this is a really important workflow. So when someone fills out a uMap, again, it's owned by the teammate, they will take a first run at defining what their top responsibilities are. This is how I understand my job. The workflow in the software asks them to go then and speak to some peers and even people outside of their department so that they can gain another perspective or use it also as an opportunity to align with colleagues and align expectations for what they do, as well as get some valuable input. Once they've done that, then they go to their direct manager and get truly aligned around those responsibilities before they accept these, save them within their uMap in the software. That is really important because we use this in regular performance conversations. We do this quarterly, and having accurate responsibilities agreed upon between a teammate and a manager is crucial to those being very valuable conversations. And we'll be talking about that in future webinars. Next, we look at the balanced uMap. This is where most of you said you were saying you would be leaning, balancing, knowing the people at a deeper level through the right side and connecting them to accountability along the left side. Now, relative to the left brain map that you just saw, you are losing something known as team success measures on the left. So you've kind of lost a little bit of connection to the overall organization's goals or team's goals, but you pick back up both favorites in the lower right-hand corner and what we call superpowers, and we're going to focus on superpowers in a future slide. These are just more pieces of information. In favorites, they're very basic things in many people's minds, but we use a list of favorites for every employee as a way to personalize the experience, and it has huge impact for us and for our clients. So that's an important difference between the balanced map and the left brain map. To focus again on one tile area, each of our maps has what's known as a personal brand icon in the center of the map. In the left brain map, it was a simple photo of a ski mountain, which I can tell a story about. This one is one that I've designed, and that's one of the ways that people will express themselves. They will design their own icons, and there are many software programs that make that very easy. So this is a simple representation of my core values that I've been working on for the last 5 years or so. And this is the purpose of the brand icon. It's to give people a platform to share meaningfully about themselves so that others can know them at a deeper level. So I can tell stories about why these 3 words are special to me that will give others a very, very authentic view into my values and my character. And it's incredibly important, particularly for leaders. When they drop their armor and share authentically, others will follow, and that's where trust and teamwork really begins. That's something we believe in very strongly. The right brain map, where we started with the picture in the computer screen. So now you can see, you've seen left all the way to the accountability side, the balance, kind of a mix of both, and then the right. This is really about getting to know people in a meaningful way. And people who choose the right brain map are really thinking, you know what, we've got this accountability thing baked. We understand how we hold each other accountable. We know what's expected. But what we'd really like to do is create a deeper community within our organization. And we're going to do that by gathering all kinds of information about them. The difference between this map and the balanced map is that you lose the individual success measures or KPIs, and you pick up something that is the best day. So now people have the ability to describe their best day. And we are trying to use that information, along with the other right side of the map, to create this personalized experience. And that best day gives us a window into their intrinsic motivators. The more we can do to personalize their experience, the more we bind them in our community. And it creates community within our teammates as well, as they know what's important to them. So the two tiles I want to focus a little bit on in this map are personal goals and superpowers. They are unique. The superpowers are unique to two of the maps. Personal goals exist in all of them. We ask for this information, for very obvious reasons probably to everybody listening. We are looking for ways that we can personalize the experience, where we can support and celebrate them as individuals, who they are today and who they aspire to be. And it allows, again, to make a very personalized experience for both. Just a really quick story, because that's all we have, I think, time for. One story that's come out of our personal goals, we gather them from everybody. Individuals will author this, and then organizations can aggregate this information. One story that came out of that situation was we found a group of gentlemen within a single organization that had a personal goal in the first year of creating a will. And a little more background, these guys all had families. They were all in relatively dangerous jobs, and they did not have a will. So that gave us the platform to ask the question, why is this? And the answers that you can expect, like it's expensive, it's morbid, I don't know where to start, all the expected responses came. But that gave us the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper, to find a resource that we could leverage, in this case corporate counsel, that came together and did a special deal for them to do those wills. And they in fact did it, and it was so economical that the organization paid for it. So it was an incredibly binding exercise, a supportive exercise that didn't cost much money, but without this platform to understand who they were and what they aspired to, you would never have known that. And now these families feel safe and incredibly loyal to that organization. So that is one of many examples of stories that also live within superpowers, where people will say, here's a skill that I have at home. And you have the ability to see if there's a translatable way to use that in the organization. I wish I could share some more stories about that, because they're touching and they are so incredibly binding for the folks who work within the organization. So unfortunately, we've only scratched the surface of these three maps. We've covered 4 of the 14 content areas, again, known as tiles. Those will be the topics that we will cover in future webinars. But I want to do a little bit of summarizing here. So this is where we've been. We've shared so far what the brain science is about the uMap. We call that the second why in our business. Why it makes sense to take this approach, because it works, because brain science proves it. We've also shared a few ideas for how to promote connectedness with the uMap. And now we're going to wrap with a few examples for how uMap is used in more tangible application within the uMap, specifically focusing on our onboarding process and some examples of how we've used it for individual development.
Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the onboarding process and touch on just a few of the elements that we incorporate by utilizing the uMap. So one thing is, prior to a new hire starting, so after the date that they've received their offer letter, but before their first date, we actually encourage companies to send that new hire a link and have them complete their uMap. So they get it done, and the idea is maybe a day or two before they start, they actually meet with their hiring manager, or who they will be reporting to, ideally maybe at a coffee shop or somewhere outside of the office. And they share their uMap. So the hiring manager has theirs there. So for instance, if I was hiring somebody, I would have my uMap with me. It would give me an opportunity to talk through my uMap and have them get a better idea of who I am, how I tick, and relate to me on a personal level, an authentic personal. It also sets the stage for trust and vulnerability because I'm sharing personal things with them. In turn, they share their uMap, whatever they've decided to share based on how they answered questions, and I, as their manager, can get a little peek into how they're wired, how they tick, what their intrinsic motivators are. But it even goes one step farther because we have them try to put together what they think that left side looks like. What is their top responsibilities? If it's a left brain and it has KPIs, what do they think would be good KPIs? What do they think their team members as a team, the expected outcome is? What kind of development and coaching would they like? And as we sit down and talk to that, it allows us to do a little realigning. If there was any misguided information, if there were some gaps during the hiring or the interviewing process that maybe they jumped to different conclusions. So it really helps look at the efficacy of the interview and hiring process as well as take out that time of confusion that every new hire has as they're trying to really understand what is expected of them. We take that a bit further then during their first week. So what we suggest is you get the team together, the new team together, and the new team members' uMap is put up on a big screen for everybody to see. I, as a manager, would introduce the new team member, talk a little bit about how excited we are to have them here, some of the value I see that they're bringing to our organization and what their role will be. And then we give them a chance to share, as they are comfortable, the information on the right side. So who their favorite people are, who's important in their life. It has pictures of their family. Depending on what uMap, it could have superpowers, it could have favorites. And generally you'll find, especially because one of the tiles is your favorite quote, there are stories about them embedded within those things that they're very comfortable sharing because it's what they have chosen to share. So it's just a really great way to get them to know them on a little deeper level.
On the training and development side, or I should say individual development process side, we have a unique approach as well. So here you have, again, my apologies. On the left-hand side is where I'm going to focus professional goals and development and coaching. So our process for individual development is just that. It is a teammate-owned process. We ask everyone in the company, myself included, and this goes with all of our clients, to author our own individual development plans. We ask people to develop that in two ways. Short-term, which is under 12 months, and you'll see that in the lower left, and then long-term, which is greater than 12 months. It's very simple, but very impactful, and we learn a lot about people and how they fill these out. These short and long-term training needs are meant to be directly contributing to those professional goals immediately above, 1, 3, and 5 years. The short term to the 1 year and the long term to the 3 and 5. So this creates an opportunity for us to collaborate and to connect with our teammates around how realistic those plans are, how connected those plans are, and there's an opportunity for a lot of development just in those conversations, and we have those conversations quarterly. And that'll be a future topic about how we go about those conversations, and it is part of our performance process. How they are authoring and moving toward their own personal development and professional goals is an aspect of performance that we focus on because it focuses on their individual success. So relatively simple, but I just want to share a couple of quick stories. One, and this is just a very basic, and there are many stories like this that would come out that you can probably add in yourselves. Had someone, a young female professional, super performer, And she had in her 1-year personal professional goal to become a personal trainer. She was not part of our business, or her business, I should say. And she put that out there, and so it gave the platform to discuss, well, how are you doing on that? And her answer was, I'm not, because I have to leave at 4 o'clock every Wednesday to go make the certification course. And that gave the opportunity to ask the question, well, still, why not? And to give the support for that person to leave every week on Wednesday at 4 o'clock to go do that and meet that personal goal meant everything in the world to her. And not only did her performance not falter, it actually improved because she was grateful for the opportunity. She felt that she was supported personally. And it's a very simple thing to do. It comes at virtually no cost, in fact, only gain. And that is one of many stories like that. The uniqueness isn't that you have these conversations and that you support your people. The uniqueness is that this was a platform for us to know it. And to have that conversation and follow a playbook for having performance be based on individual success in their own development, that's what really was novel about that example. Another one, this is actually in our own business, where we've had a young, again, dynamic teammate who had been here for a relatively short time, only 6 months. And in her 1-year professional, or 1-year professional goal, rather, her goal was less faking it, more making it, which was cute when she walked in the door. But as a 6-month employee, this gave us the opportunity, and this is actually a personal experience, gave me the opportunity to really affirm her and tell her this is where, first of all, it's time to put a little more meat on that bone. Right? It's time to get serious about your own professional goals and development and actually name what that is. And less faking it, more making it doesn't do it justice anymore, because here's where I see you as your potential. And frankly, it was far greater than she was aspiring in her own mind. So it was an opportunity to provide some very serious affirmation. But at the same time, the question that was important that I asked was, that's great, this is how I see you, but where do you see yourself? And that's what's powerful about this. It needs to be the person that you aspire to be, not the person that I aspire you to be necessarily. And so we have this frank conversation around whether or how her opinion on that matter will inform her positioning within our organization and whether we would hire for future needs if, in fact, that wasn't her aspiration. So there's a lot of practical use in here as well.
So we took you through understanding a small amount of the brain science, and we dive into this much deeper, and we'll probably have opportunities to do that also in future webinars. Rob gave you just a high-level overview of our uMap. We have 3 templates that we use, and there's actually a performance management system that sits behind this uMap. That is also a guide, and we will share a little bit more with that also in a future webinar. And then opportunity to give you just a few examples. Picked 2 areas, onboarding and personal development, but there's many, many more areas that we have applications in, and a lot of historic data from those that have used it that shows how impactful it's been in the organization.
And it's all about being that organization. This is one of our tags, and this is a way to get in contact with us. One, we'll have other options for you to get in contact with us directly if you'd like. But again, we're all about creating environments where people thrive, and that doesn't happen by accident. It takes very real intention. If you think back to my opening story where I'm sitting around as the young president of this organization, and I asked my question, and I met with, are you out of your bleeping mind? Now after hearing Jodi, and literally Jodi has taught me this over the last 10 years, that I know now how to label that. It is an amygdala hijack, and I will tell you that I vaguely remember how I reacted. Others had to remind me, but I regretted how I reacted. And so what Jodi mentioned did hold true. And now we see how we have those impacts in so many other people through our understanding of brain science. And we're trying to create this environment through the uMap and through our interactions to maximize that reward state and minimize these hijacks. And so that's really what we're all about. And further, what we found, again, that when we focus on the success of our people as they define it, it makes all the difference. The performance does happen. The tough conversations also still happen, but they're easier. They're less threatening. They're more collaborative. And this is going to be the focus of topics as we go forward in this series in future webinars. Or as I mentioned before, you can always reach out directly to us to learn more. So before we open up for questions, I guess I would just like to thank the Best and Brightest program once more for their partnership, for their endorsement of us. They are a client. They are using the uMap, and we're grateful for their for that and for their endorsement and for really embracing our approach to performance and development as the key things that they focus on, but also all of the connecting applications within the uMap as well. And thank you all for your time. So now I think we're going to open for questions.
Hi, Rob. I was wondering, do you have any recommended reading? You mentioned Daniel Pink.
Oh my, boy, we have a library of recommended readings. Personally, I'm a big believer in just about anything that Patrick Lencioni has written. We do a lot with the Ultimate Team Player, and oh, for goodness sake, one that. Jodi, help me. I'm sticking on the five dysfunctions of a team. Right. We're big on trust and vulnerability in work. Anything by Brene Brown as well.
I'm a big proponent of a book called Crucial Conversations. It deals a lot with having those conversations and learning how to keep them in a safe mode and how to reset when you notice that the conversation is becoming threatening to somebody.
Another one in my favorite recommendation list is Essentialism by Greg McCune. It's a slightly different topic, but it's a way to really focus your life about what's truly important. And as busy people and leaders, it's something that really spoke to me.
Okay, thank you. One other thing, how do you encourage people, especially your new hires, to put down their actual real goals and not just the goals that they think the company wants to hear?
Oh, that is a brilliant question. Congratulations to whoever asked that one. So really, that is a risk, right? But the way we approach that is that it starts at the top. Being authentic and vulnerable and creating an environment where people are willing to give their actual honest answers is really all about starting at the top and having it disseminate through the culture of a company, because this can be viewed as a threatening exercise unless you support it in a very authentic way. And we have seen, through some of our clients where they have questioned that very thing. But the beauty is that when you have this platform, you have an ability to then assess the value of your culture and hit those things head on where you believe the lack of authenticity hits. We haven't talked about this, and it's not really something we lead with around the uMap, but when you aggregate information around these uMaps, you get a barometer for your actual culture, how vulnerable, how authentic they're going to be. But that is something that your frontline managers really need to manage carefully, and it can be a measure of their performance as managers. Jodi, is there anything you want to add about that?
The only thing I would share is what we found as people start sharing their uMaps, and like Rob mentioned, it really should start at the top. So the CEO or the head of a division gets up there and shares a lot of their personal things. We often find after we've gone through a few of them, people say, I want to go in and make some changes. So some of that willingness and that vulnerability naturally happens as you see other people being more vulnerable. It is a little bit of a growing movement as the more you use it.
Okay. I just want to take this moment to say thank you to Rob and Jodi and to all the participants we had today. Remember to fill out your SurveyMonkey evaluation that you should get by the end of the day so that you are able to get your credits. That's it. We're going to wrap it up from there.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.